I used to think life-changing moments came with warning signs. A phone call in the middle of the night. A doctor walking into a waiting room with bad news. A police officer standing on a front porch. What I never expected was that the moment that shattered my entire life would arrive on an ordinary Thursday afternoon while I was folding laundry and arguing with myself about what to make for dinner. If someone had told me that morning that by sunset I would question every year of my marriage, I would have laughed. Back then, I thought I knew exactly who my husband was. His name was Ethan. We'd been married for 6 years and together for almost 9. He was dependable, successful, charming without trying too hard, the kind of man who remembered birthdays, sent flowers for no reason, and never forgot to text if he was running late. At least that's what I believed. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, Ethan was supposedly in Chicago on a business trip. He'd left 2 days earlier. I even had a selfie he'd sent from his hotel room that morning. Everything seemed normal. Then someone knocked on my door. At first I ignored it. Packages were usually left on the porch. Salespeople rarely came to our neighborhood. The knock came again. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Something about it made me uneasy. I set down the towel I was folding and walked toward the front door. The sky outside was gray with rain. Water streaked down the glass beside the entrance. I opened the door. A woman stood on my porch. She looked to be around my age. Mid-30s. Dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail, jeans, black jacket. And no umbrella. Her clothes were damp from the rain, but what stood out most wasn't her appearance. It was her expression. She looked terrified and determined, like someone forcing herself to do something she desperately didn't want to do. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then she asked quietly, "Are you Claire Walker?" I frowned. "Yes." The woman swallowed. Her eyes briefly closed, as if she'd just confirmed something she'd been hoping wasn't true. "I need to talk to you." Something tightened in my stomach. "Do I know you?" "No." "Then what's this about?" She looked past me into the house, then back at me. "It's about Ethan." The moment she said his name, every instinct I had went on alert. I didn't know why. I just knew something was wrong. "How do you know my husband?" The woman hesitated. For a second I thought she might cry. Instead she reached into her purse. My pulse quickened. She pulled out a photograph. Then she handed it to me. At first my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. It was a wedding photo. The woman standing in front of me wore a white dress. Beside her stood a man in a tuxedo. Both were smiling. Both looked happy. I stared, then stared harder, because the man in the photo was Ethan, my husband. My knees nearly gave out. I looked up. "What is this?" Her voice cracked. "My name is Rebecca." A pause. Then the sentence that changed everything. "And I'm married to your husband." For a moment I genuinely thought I might faint. The world seemed to go silent. I heard the rain. I heard my own heartbeat. Everything else disappeared. I looked at the photo again. Then at her. Then back at the photo. "No." The word came out automatically. "No, that's impossible." She nodded. "I know. No. You don't understand." My voice was shaking now. "That's my husband." Her eyes filled with tears. "I know. No." I stepped backward. This has to be some kind of mistake. I thought so too. I stared at her. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days, maybe weeks. For the first time, I noticed dark circles under her eyes, the trembling in her hands, the way she kept gripping her purse strap. This wasn't someone running a scam. This wasn't someone looking for attention. This was someone who was terrified. Just like me. I should have closed the door. I should have told her to leave. Instead I heard myself say, "Come inside." 20 minutes later we were sitting across from each other at my kitchen table. Neither of us had touched the coffee I'd made. The room felt too small, too quiet, too tense. Rebecca opened a folder she'd brought with her. The sight of it made my stomach drop. And no one brings a folder full of documents unless they've spent a long time preparing for something. She carefully removed several photographs, then spread them across the table. Every single one featured Ethan. Vacation photos, birthday celebrations, holiday gatherings, family barbecues. In one picture, Ethan stood beside Rebecca holding a little girl on his shoulders. The child couldn't have been older than 7. She was laughing, completely unaware that her entire existence had just become another piece of evidence in a nightmare. I couldn't stop staring. The photos looked real, natural. Years of memories. Not edited. Not fabricated. Real. My hands began shaking. When were these taken? Rebecca pointed to dates written on the back. My stomach turned. One picture had been taken 3 years earlier. Another 5 years earlier. Another just 8 months ago. Every date overlapped with periods when Ethan had supposedly been with me. The room suddenly felt difficult to breathe in. I pushed away from the table. No, I stood up. This can't be happening. Rebecca didn't argue. She didn't try to convince me. Instead, she quietly asked, "How long have you known him?" I looked at her. 9 years. The color drained from her face. 9. I nodded. Her hands began trembling again. Then she whispered, "So have I." The words hit me like a punch. Neither of us spoke, because we both understood what that meant. Whatever was happening, it wasn't recent. It wasn't an affair. It wasn't one mistake. It was something much bigger, something much worse. Rebecca finally broke the silence. "How long have you been married?" 6 years. Her eyes widened. Then she looked down. As though she'd just lost the last bit of hope she had left. 7. I stared. What? We've been married 7 years. The room spun. For several seconds I genuinely thought I might throw up. There was only one question left. The question neither of us wanted answered. I looked at the photograph with the little girl, then at Rebecca. "Is that your daughter?" Rebecca nodded. "Her name is Emma." My chest tightened. "Does Ethan?" I couldn't finish. She answered anyway. "She thinks he's her father." Silence filled the kitchen. Heavy, painful, endless. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Inside, my entire understanding of reality was collapsing, because if what Rebecca was saying was true, then the man I had loved for nearly a decade wasn't just hiding an affair. He wasn't living a double life. He was living two completely separate realities. And somehow, neither of us had known. Then Rebecca said something that made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. "There's something even stranger." I slowly looked up. "What?" She opened the folder again, pulled out another document, and slid it across the table. The moment I saw the name printed at the top of the page, my blood ran cold, because it wasn't Ethan's name. It was mine, and somehow, a private investigator had been watching me for months. For a long moment, I couldn't take my eyes off the document lying on the table. My name was printed across the top. Claire Walker underneath was my home address, my workplace, my car registration, even places I visited regularly, the grocery store I preferred, the gym I attended twice a week, the coffee shop where I sometimes worked remotely. A chill crawled up my spine. I looked at Rebecca. "What is this?" Her expression was full of guilt. The kind of guilt that told me she had asked herself that same question 100 times. A private investigator's report. I swallowed. Why was someone investigating me? Rebecca looked down. "Because I hired him." The words landed like a slap. For a second, anger replaced shock. "You what?" "I thought you were his mistress." The room went silent. I stared at her. She didn't look defensive. She looked ashamed. "I didn't know about you, Claire. I swear, I thought Ethan was having an affair." I wanted to be furious. Honestly, part of me was. But if I were in her position, if I discovered suspicious charges, unexplained trips, secret phone calls. I probably would have done the same thing. Rebecca continued. It started 6 months ago. I sat back down slowly. What started? The lies. I almost laughed at the absurdity of that statement. From where I was sitting, it sounded like Ethan's lies had started years ago, but Rebecca meant something specific. She opened the folder again. There were business trips that didn't make sense. I immediately thought about Chicago. The conference. The hotel selfie. The dozens of trips he'd taken over the years, trips I had never questioned. Rebecca slid several printed bank statements toward me. Highlighted charges covered the pages. Hotels, restaurants, gas stations, airline tickets, all in my state. Not hers. My stomach dropped. These are recent. She nodded. At first, I thought he was seeing someone. I looked at the dates, every highlighted charge lined up with weekends Ethan had supposedly been working, or traveling, or visiting clients. Excuses I'd accepted without hesitation, because why wouldn't I? He was my husband, the person I trusted most. Rebecca took a shaky breath. So I hired an investigator. I looked at the report again, every page felt invasive. Photographs of me entering grocery stores, walking through parking lots, leaving work, going home. The investigator had followed me for nearly 3 months. Without my knowledge, without my consent. And all because I happened to be married to the same man. My head hurt. How did he find me? Rebecca pointed to one section. A utility bill. I frowned. What? He traced an address Ethan was paying for. I blinked. What do you mean paying for? Rebecca stared at me, then she asked a question that made my heart stop. Does Ethan own this house? I looked around the kitchen. The kitchen I'd spent years decorating. The kitchen where we'd hosted holidays. The kitchen where we'd planned our future. Yes. Rebecca slowly shook her head. No, my pulse quickened. What are you talking about? She slid another document across the table. Property records. Official records. County records. The owner wasn't Ethan. The owner wasn't me. The owner was a company. A company I never heard of. I stared at the paperwork. What is this? The investigator looked into it. I felt dizzy. Ethan doesn't own our house. Rebecca shook her head. The company does. I looked again. Then again, hoping I'd misunderstood. I hadn't. For 6 years I'd believed Ethan owned the home we'd shared. Apparently, he never had. And suddenly I realized something terrifying. How many things had I simply accepted because he told me they were true? The answer was becoming clearer every minute. Too many. Rebecca pulled out her phone. I need to show you something. I braced myself. At this point, every new revelation felt worse than the last. She opened a photo album, then handed me the phone. The first picture showed Ethan standing beside a lake. The second showed him helping Emma ride a bicycle. The third showed him opening Christmas presents. The fourth stopped me cold. I zoomed in. My heart started pounding. The date was visible in the corner. December 24th. 3 years ago. Christmas Eve. I remembered that Christmas Eve perfectly. Ethan had told me he was stuck in Denver because of a snowstorm. His flight had been canceled. He couldn't make it home. I spent that evening alone, crying, trying to convince myself it wasn't a big deal. Meanwhile, according to the photograph in my hand, he'd been celebrating Christmas with Rebecca and Emma. Not stranded, not delayed, not traveling. Lying. My chest tightened. Rebecca quietly watched me. Neither of us needed to say anything. The truth was obvious. Every memory now felt contaminated, every explanation, every excuse, every story. I set the phone down. Then another thought hit me, a thought so obvious I couldn't believe neither of us had asked it sooner. Where is he right now? Rebecca frowned. Chicago. I laughed. Not because anything was funny, because the alternative was screaming. No, Rebecca stared. What? I looked her directly in the eyes. If he's lying to both of us, I grabbed my own phone, opened our text messages, and showed her the selfie Ethan had sent that morning. Hotel room, bed, lamp, window. Everything looked normal. Rebecca suddenly leaned forward. Wait. What? She pointed to the image. The date. I frowned. What about it? Zoom in. I enlarged the photo. My stomach dropped. The date displayed on the television screen in the background wasn't today's date. It was from nearly 8 months earlier. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. Then Rebecca whispered, "Oh my God. The photograph wasn't taken that morning. It wasn't even recent." Ethan had reused an old photo, which meant he might not be in Chicago at all. A terrible possibility entered my mind. And judging by Rebecca's expression, she'd reached the same conclusion. There could be another house. The words hung in the air. Neither of us wanted to say them, but they were impossible to ignore. One wife was already unthinkable. 2 families was insane. But what if there was more? Rebecca slowly reached into the folder one final time. I haven't shown you everything. My heart sank. There's more. She nodded. Then she handed me a single sheet of paper. 1 page. 1 bank record. 1 monthly payment. Made every month for years. The amount wasn't enormous. But it wasn't small either. Enough to matter. The money wasn't going to Rebecca. It wasn't going to me. It wasn't going toward the house. And it wasn't linked to any account either of us recognized. I stared at the name of the recipient. A name I'd never seen before. A 17-year-old boy living 3 states away. My voice barely worked. Who is this? Rebecca slowly shook her head. I don't know. A knot formed in my stomach, because suddenly, the idea of a third secret life no longer seemed impossible. And deep down, I already knew what both of us were thinking. The same terrifying question. Was this Ethan's son? For a long time, neither of us spoke. The bank statement sat between us on the kitchen table like a live grenade. A 17-year-old boy. 3 states away. Monthly payments. 4 years. No explanation. No obvious connection. And one husband who had already been caught living 2 separate lives. At that point, almost anything seemed possible. I stared at the name again. Logan Reed. The payment description wasn't helpful. No notes. No details. Just a recurring transfer that happened on the 15th of every month. Without fail. Rebecca rubbed her temples. I keep hoping we're wrong. I looked up. About what? She hesitated. About all of it. I understood exactly what she meant. Because despite everything we'd uncovered, some irrational part of me still wanted a simple explanation. A misunderstanding. A mistake. Anything. Instead, every answer seemed to create 3 new questions. I stood and walked toward the window. Rain still tapped softly against the glass. The world outside looked completely normal. People were driving home from work, walking dogs, running errands. Meanwhile, my entire life felt like it had been dropped into a blender. I need air. Rebecca nodded. I know. I turned back toward her. No, I mean I need to think. She offered a sad smile. Good luck. That almost made me laugh, almost. Because thinking wasn't helping anymore. The facts were piling up faster than I could process them. 1 wife. Another wife. A secret company. A house Ethan didn't own. Fake business trips. Fake photographs. Secret money. And now a teenage boy. It felt endless. Then something occurred to me. Do you know Ethan's family well? Rebecca frowned. I thought I did. What about siblings? Her expression changed, just slightly. Enough for me to notice. He had a brother. Past tense. I immediately caught it. Had. Rebecca nodded. He died years ago. I froze. That was news to me. Ethan has a brother. Had. Apparently. But I never heard about him. Not once. 9 years together, 6 years married. And somehow I'd never heard a single story about a brother. My stomach tightened. What was his name? Ryan. I sat down again. Why didn't I know that? Rebecca looked just as confused. He talked about him all the time when we first met. That answer bothered me even more. How could Ethan discuss his brother constantly with one wife and never mention him to another? The realization hit me, because they weren't just different relationships. They were different versions of Ethan, different personalities, different histories, different lives. He wasn't simply lying. He was editing himself depending on who he was with. The thought sent chills through me. Rebecca suddenly sat upright. Wait. What? She grabbed her phone, started scrolling, then stopped. Oh my God. My pulse quickened. What? She turned the screen toward me, a photograph. Old. At least 10 years old, two young men standing beside each other. One was unmistakably Ethan, the other looked remarkably similar. Same eyes, same smile, same jawline. His brother, Ryan. I stared at the picture. Then something caught my attention. A child, barely visible in the background, maybe 7 or 8 years old, standing beside Ryan. I pointed. Who's that? Rebecca leaned closer, then her eyes widened. I don't know. We looked at each other. Neither of us said it. But we were thinking the same thing. A teenage boy today would have been around that age then. Suddenly Logan Reed didn't feel like a random name anymore. I felt connected, very connected. But before we could explore the possibility, my phone buzzed. The sound nearly made me jump. I looked down. A text message. From Ethan. Miss you already. Flight lands tomorrow afternoon. Can't wait to see you. Love you. I stared at the screen, then handed the phone to Rebecca. She read the message. Her expression hardened. For the first time since arriving, I saw anger replace sadness. Pure anger. How does he do it? I didn't answer, because I honestly didn't know. How does someone text I love you while maintaining an entirely separate family? How does someone sleep at night? How does someone remember all the lies? The more I learned about Ethan, the less I recognized him. Rebecca handed the phone back. Then she surprised me. We need to stop reacting. What? We need a plan. I blinked. A plan? She nodded. Because right now he's controlling everything. I hated how right she was. Ethan had spent years directing the story, choosing what we knew, choosing what we believed, choosing what reality looked like. For once, that needed to change. So what do you suggest? Rebecca leaned forward. We find Logan. I stared at her. You mean contact him? Yes. How? The investigator gave me an address. That caught my attention immediately. You have his address? Rebecca reached into the folder, pulled out another page, and slid it across the table. There it was. A small town I'd never heard of. A street name. A house number. An address 3 states away. My heart pounded. For the first time all day, we weren't just uncovering secrets, we were moving toward answers. But there was a problem. A major one. What if he tells Ethan? Rebecca considered that, then slowly nodded. He might. And if Ethan realizes we're investigating, he'll start covering his tracks. Exactly. That was the danger. For years, Ethan had stayed ahead because he controlled information. The moment he felt threatened, he'd start hiding evidence, deleting records, moving money, changing plans. Whatever he needed to do, which meant we needed to be smarter, more careful. Rebecca suddenly smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had reached her limit, someone who was done being manipulated. I think we should let him believe he's winning. I felt a chill. What do you mean? She looked directly at me. We act normal. My stomach tightened. The idea sounded awful, But it also sounded effective. Rebecca continued. You keep talking to him. I hated that already. You answer texts. I hated it more. You pretend everything is fine. I hated it most of all, but she wasn't finished. Meanwhile, we investigate. I slowly nodded. The plan made sense, which was exactly why it scared me. Because if we did this, there would be no going back. And no pretending we didn't. No. And no second chances. And no benefit of the doubt. This would become a full investigation of our own husband. The thought was surreal, yet necessary. I looked down at the address one final time, then folded the paper carefully. Okay. Rebecca nodded. Okay. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The clouds were beginning to break apart. A thin line of sunlight appeared across the yard. For a brief second, everything seemed peaceful. Then my phone buzzed. Again, another message from Ethan. I opened it, and immediately felt my blood run cold. A photograph. A brand new selfie. Ethan standing beside a smiling blonde woman. Not Rebecca. Not me. The caption underneath read, had dinner with an old friend tonight. Funny coincidence, you remind me of her. For several seconds I couldn't breathe. Rebecca looked at my face. What is it? Without speaking, I handed her the phone. She stared at the image, then looked up, completely pale. Because the woman in the photograph wasn't an old friend. She was the real estate agent listed on the paperwork for the company that owned my house, and somehow, she had just become the most important person in Ethan's secret life. For several seconds, neither Rebecca nor I said a word. We just stared at the image on my phone. Ethan was smiling, relaxed, comfortable, like a man with absolutely nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, the woman standing beside him had just connected multiple pieces of a puzzle that was becoming increasingly disturbing. Rebecca looked up first. You're sure? I nodded. The investigator found her name in the property records. Rebecca took another look at the photo. The blonde woman appeared to be in her early 40s, professional, confident, the kind of person you'd trust during a business transaction, not the kind of person you'd expect to be connected to a man secretly living multiple lives. What's her name? I checked the paperwork. Melissa Grant. Rebecca immediately wrote it down. Then she looked at me. We need to know who she is. I agreed. Unfortunately, finding that answer turned out to be easier than either of us expected, and much worse. The next morning, neither of us slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing wedding photographs, bank statements, fake business trips, and Ethan smiling into his phone while lying to both of us. By 7 a.m., I was sitting at my kitchen table with coffee I wasn't drinking. Rebecca arrived 20 minutes later. She looked just as exhausted. Without a word, she placed her laptop on the table. What did you find? She opened a browser window, then turned the screen toward me. The top was a company website, a real estate investment company. Nothing unusual at first glance. Professional photos, corporate language, investment opportunities, property management. The sort of website most people would leave after 30 seconds. Then, I noticed the executive team page, and there she was. Melissa Grant. My stomach dropped. Not an employee, not an assistant, not a realtor. She was one of the owners. Rebecca clicked another page, then another, then another. My pulse quickened, because one name kept appearing. Melissa Grant. Melissa Grant. Melissa Grant. The company Ethan used was practically built around her. What does this mean? Rebecca leaned back. I don't know. I stared at the screen. But Ethan somehow ended up using her company. Exactly. Neither of us liked where this was going. The connection felt too close to be accidental. Then Rebecca opened another document. I found something else. I braced myself. At that point, Every sentence seemed to begin with bad news. She pointed at a public business filing. One section was highlighted. I leaned closer, then froze, because Ethan's name was listed. Not as an employee, not as a customer, as a minority partner, for several seconds. I couldn't process what I was reading. What? Rebecca nodded slowly. He owns part of the company. I looked again, and again, hoping I'd misunderstood. I hadn't. The filing was official, public, verifiable, real. The room suddenly felt smaller. Ethan owns part of the company that owns our house? Rebecca nodded. And apparently part of the company that owns mine. I stared. What? She slid another property record toward me. Her house. Same company. Same ownership. Structure. Same names. My blood ran cold. The houses weren't separate accidents. They were connected, designed that way. Planned. For years. The realization was horrifying. This wasn't some reckless affair that spiraled out of control. This was organized, intentional, calculated. A system, a structure, a hidden life built on paperwork, companies, and lies. For the first time, I stopped seeing Ethan as a man trapped between two families and started seeing him as something else entirely. Someone who had planned every detail, someone who expected never to get caught. By noon, we had uncovered enough information to make both of us sick, but one question remained. Why? Not why he lied. That part was obvious. Why all the complexity? Why companies? Why hidden ownership? Why fake business trips? Why separate financial systems? It felt excessive, almost paranoid. Unless there was another reason. Rebecca finally voiced what I was thinking. What if we're not looking at the real secret? I looked up. What do you mean? She folded her arms. What if the marriages were just part of it? A chill ran through me, because I'd been wondering the same thing. Maybe the double life wasn't the main story. Maybe it was the distraction, the visible secret hiding something bigger. Before either of us could continue, my phone rang. The caller ID made my heart stop. Ethan. I looked at Rebecca. She nodded. Answer. My stomach twisted. I didn't want to hear his voice, didn't want to hear another lie, but she was right. We needed information. I took a breath and answered. Hey. His voice sounded warm, comfortable, normal, exactly like every other day. Hey, sweetheart. The word almost made me sick. How's Chicago? I heard a brief pause, then he laughed. Busy. Liar. Conference still going? Yeah. Liar. Long day. The longest. Liar. Every sentence felt unreal. I suddenly understood why investigators burn out. Listening to lies when you know the truth is exhausting. Then Ethan said something unexpected. I'm flying home tomorrow. I froze. Tomorrow? That wasn't the plan. He was supposed to return in 3 days. My pulse quickened. Early. Yeah. His tone sounded casual, too casual. I missed you. I glanced at Rebecca. She looked concerned. Very concerned. Because we were both thinking the same thing. People don't suddenly change plans without a reason, especially people who spend years controlling every detail. Something had changed. The question was what? After a few more minutes, the call ended. The moment I hung up, Rebecca spoke. He's nervous. I nodded. So am I. No, she leaned forward. He's nervous. The certainty in her voice made me pause. What makes you think that? He came home early. I considered that she was right. The timing was suspicious, very suspicious. Then my phone vibrated again. A new message. Not from Ethan, unknown number. Rebecca and I exchanged a look. Slowly, I opened it. The message contained only one sentence. No greeting. No explanation. No signature. Just 6 words. Stop looking before someone gets hurt. For a moment, I genuinely thought my heart had stopped. Rebecca, read the message. Her face turned white. Neither of us spoke, because suddenly this wasn't just about betrayal. It wasn't just about lies. Someone knew we were investigating, and somehow they knew exactly where to find us. For several seconds, neither Rebecca nor I moved. The message sat on my screen. Stop looking before someone gets hurt. 6 words. That was all it took to change everything. Until that moment, this had been a story about betrayal. A terrible betrayal, but still a personal one. Now it felt different. Now it felt dangerous. Rebecca broke the silence first. Did Ethan send it? I shook my head. I don't know. But deep down, I didn't think he had. The message felt wrong. Too direct. Too deliberate. Too threatening. Whoever sent it wanted one thing to scare us. Unfortunately for them, fear had already been replaced by anger, and anger is much harder to control. That night neither of us slept. The next morning Ethan arrived, right on schedule, smiling, carrying his suitcase, walking through my front door like nothing had happened, like he wasn't standing on top of years of lies. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for him, because he had no idea the game was over. Hey, sweetheart. He leaned forward to kiss me. I stepped back. His smile faltered, only slightly. But I noticed, for the first time, uncertainty appeared in his eyes. Everything okay? I stared at him. The man I'd loved for nearly a decade. The man I'd trusted more than anyone. And suddenly he felt like a complete stranger. Before I could answer, another voice spoke from the living room. Not really. Ethan froze. Rebecca stepped into view. The color drained from his face instantly. The suitcase slipped from his hand. The sound echoed through the house. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then Ethan whispered, "Oh God." Not "who is this?" Not "what's going on?" Not confusion. Recognition. Guilt. Fear. Everything we needed to know. The truth was standing right there. The next 2 hours changed everything. At first Ethan denied nothing, which somehow felt worse. There was no dramatic argument, no shouting, no elaborate excuses, because he knew he had been caught completely. Instead, he sat at my dining room table with his head in his hands and finally started talking. The real story was somehow stranger than anything either of us had imagined. Years earlier, before either marriage, Ethan had gone into business with his childhood friend, Melissa Grant, the woman from the photograph, the woman connected to the company, the woman connected to both houses. Together they built a real estate investment business. It grew quickly, very quickly, according to Ethan. That success changed him. The money, the opportunities, the travel, the attention. Eventually, he met Rebecca, fell in love, married her, started a family. That should have been the end of the story, but it wasn't, because a year later he met me, and instead of making a choice, he made a decision that would destroy all of us. He chose both. I told myself it was temporary. His voice cracked. I thought I'd figure it out. Neither of us responded, because we both knew that was a lie. Temporary doesn't last 7 years. Temporary doesn't involve companies, property ownership, secret finances, fake travel schedules. That wasn't confusion. That was planning. Years of planning. Ethan looked at me, then at Rebecca. Tears filled his eyes. I loved both of you. Rebecca laughed bitterly. The sound cut through the room. No, she shook her head. You loved yourself for the first time. Ethan had no answer. Then came the question that had haunted us for days. The money. The teenager. Logan Reed. I watched Ethan's face change immediately. And I knew that was the real secret. Not the marriages. Not the houses. Not even the lies. Logan. Slowly. Ethan sat back, then he told us the truth. Years before meeting either of us, his younger brother Ryan had died in a car accident. Ryan left behind a small son. Logan. At the time, Logan's mother was struggling financially. Ethan promised he would help, and he kept that promise for 17 years. Every month, without fail, the room fell silent because, for the first time since this nightmare began, we weren't hearing a lie, we were hearing something human, something real, something good. Rebecca spoke quietly. Why hide it? Ethan looked down, and the answer broke something inside me. Because I didn't want questions. That was it. Not shame. Not guilt. Convenience. He'd hidden his nephew for the same reason he'd hidden 2 marriages, the same reason he'd hidden finances, the same reason he'd hidden entire years of his life. Truth complicated things. Lies made life easier. At least for him. Then Rebecca asked the final question, the one neither of us had been brave enough to ask. The message. Ethan frowned. What message? I showed him my phone. He read it, then looked genuinely confused. I didn't send this. I believed him. To my surprise, so did Rebecca. The expression on his face was real, which meant someone else knew, someone else had been watching. Eventually the answer came from an unexpected place. Melissa. After being confronted, she admitted she'd discovered our investigation. Not through spying. Not through Ethan. Through the private investigator. One of her employees happened to know him. When she realized what was happening, she panicked. The threat had been hers. A stupid attempt to protect the company from scandal. Nothing more. No conspiracy. No criminal network. Just another person making bad decisions to protect a secret. In a strange way, it felt fitting. The entire disaster had started because people kept choosing lies over difficult conversations. 3 months later, I filed for divorce. Rebecca did too. Neither of us hesitated. Not because we hated Ethan. Oddly enough, hatred had faded. What remained was something simpler. Trust was gone. And once trust disappears, love doesn't survive for long. The legal process was ugly. The financial cleanup was worse. But eventually it ended. For the first time in years, everyone involved was living in the truth. Even if that truth hurt. 2 years later, my life looks completely different. I moved. Started over. Changed careers. Made new friends. Built a life that belongs entirely to me. Rebecca and I still talk every week. What started as a nightmare turned into an unexpected friendship. Emma occasionally calls me Aunt Claire. The first time she did, I cried. Not because I was sad, because after everything that happened, it reminded me that good things can grow from terrible beginnings. As for Ethan, I hear updates occasionally. Nothing dramatic. He's rebuilding. Trying to repair relationships. Trying to become someone better than the man he used to be. I hope he succeeds. I really do. But that's his journey now, not mine. Sometimes, people ask me what the hardest part was. Discovering the second wife. Learning about the lies. Watching my marriage collapse. They're always surprised by my answer. Because the hardest part wasn't losing Ethan. It was realizing that the person I thought I knew never really existed. I had loved a version of him. A carefully edited version. A character he created. And when the truth finally arrived, it didn't come through a confession. It arrived on a rainy afternoon, standing on my front porch, holding a photograph, and introducing herself as my husband's wife. If Rebecca hadn't knocked on my door that day, I might still be living inside a lie. Instead, she gave me something far more valuable. The truth. And as painful as the truth can be, I've learned something important. A painful truth will always be better than a comfortable lie, every single time.
Thanks for watching. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.